why the winds are dying. How long I will be here, I do not know. One thing I'm sure of, winds will blow.
Hi everybody, thanks for stopping by to check out the latest from Sailing Emerald Steel. In this video we're going to be discussing sailing the west coast of the United States. And before we get started, once again we'd like to thank all of you for all the thumbs up and great comments on our last video. We love hearing from you guys, so keep the comments coming.
In this video we will be discussing sailing from Southern California or from Hawaii up northward to Straits of Fuga, the Cape Flattery. Now I think it's important to discuss that because although a lot of people made it passages, the truth is that that passage can be easy but can be also very, very difficult. As we made that passage 10 or 12 times throughout the years. Just right now, a couple of days ago, I read in a Facebook a couple with a 45-foot sailboat. They left Hawaii for a Pacific Northwest.
They had been sailing for 17 years and they were experienced cruisers. They had almost done a circumnavigation, I believe.
Only about 200 miles from Straits of Fuga, run into a nasty weather. They had to turn around and run with it. On the end, they had to activate the EPIRB, and the Coast Guard from Grace Harbor went after them. They were about 200 miles offshore to rescue them. So after all these years, they ended up losing their boat only a couple hundred miles from the end of their voyage.
I'll leave the link in the description of our video so you can click on and read the story if you're interested.
The same way with a good friend of ours decided to sail from Canada to Hawaii, and he contacted us and asked a lot of questions, what to expect, what not. And I pretty much tell them that it doesn't matter what we're going to tell you, the weather is so unpredictable, then you can pretty much be prepared for anything. And after several days of a strong gale, he gave up on the continue to Hawaii. He was still close enough to shore, so he went into Eureka, and then he pretty much terminated his cruising plans and decided to go back to Canada because it was just a little too hard on him.
He was going to single hand though, and it was his first time trying a long offshore passage.
So pretty much what we found out is this year, that when you're just starting your cruising on open ocean, if you are unlucky and have right away a bad weather, a lot of people give up the cruising life altogether because they don't have nothing, no nice days to lean back on for remembering. But they are close to a shore, so they decide to just give up, and a lot of these people don't wait for better weather. They just say, okay, I had enough of it. Where if you leave for a long ocean passage and say first week or 10 days you have a nice weather, then when bad weather comes, you're too far offshore. It's what they call a point of no return, and then you have no choice but to put up with it. And after a few days, when the weather improves, suddenly you have a nice days of sailing, and pretty soon you're going to forget about all the hell you went through, and then you just keep on continuing enjoying your life. So it all depends how lucky you are when you're starting your cruising.
You can just imagine if it's your first offshore passage and from the very beginning the weather is terrible, maybe you're slightly seasick, you can't cook or anything, you'd be giving up. A lot of people would give up right away. Just it's too hard.
We went up the coast and down the coast several times, maybe like 10, 12 times. We made an ocean passage from Hawaii up north, and those ones of you who follow our story know then within 100 miles of Cape Flattery, we ran into a strong gale and we got knocked down. Luckily we didn't end up as bad as those people. But still we had some bad experience. You pretty much have to be prepared for everything. We stay within say 10-15 miles from the shore, and I can tell you overall, if you take that passage, you are safer only because you can listen to the weather forecast and you always have some places to hide. If you make the decision soon enough, you always can make a harbor for safety. Then once you are offshore also, the waves are much larger, the winds are much stronger, and pretty much no place to hide. So when we left San Diego, we decided to stay within 20 miles offshore on our way up north, and we decided also that we take our time and we will not be in a hurry and listen to the weather forecast, and actually paid off. What we found out was this thing here. Then for 2-3 days you have a light northwesterly winds. Then they picked up stronger. And then afterwards, say again, after 3-4 days, you get a little light southerly. And then from light southerly go back to light. So once we left San Diego, naturally, first place we stopped was Catalina Island, where we spent a couple of days enjoying ourselves. And once we left Catalina, we headed straight for a Coho anchorage, which is a south side of Point Conception. Now, Point Conception, for some reason, always have a reasonably strong winds blowing from a north-northwest down the coast. So it's not something you want to fight at an afternoon.
Definitely not.
But we found out that if you anchor in a Coho anchorage and you wait till about 3 o'clock in the morning, then you can make a safe passage around a point. All you have to really worry about is a lot of times it's a fog, and offshore you have some oil platforms, so you want to make sure that you're not going to run into some of them. Once you anchor in a Coho anchorage, remember there is a lot of kelp and also seagrass, which is kind of like
it's very rubbery. It's kind of hard to anchor there.
And when you try to lift your anchor up, it gets stuck on your chain and you just can't just shake it off.
The holding around's good, but the seaweed's kind of weird.
You have to really pull all the seaweed from your chain because it's like a rubber plastic band.
Yeah.
Now also when you decide to leave the anchorage, try to make sure you give a good clearance of the Point Conception, because on the northern side you have reasonable size of swells running, and here the picture show it, two boats end up on the shore because they didn't give enough clearance, and once you get caught on those breakers you pretty much can forget it. But once you get past the Point Conception and Point Agrula, you can stop in Port St. Louis. Now, if you have a good weather and the forecast holds, if you have 3-4 people, or even 2 people, and you want to just rough it, you can just continue farther north. But in our case, we decided to spend a night anchoring. This way we made a passage with one night on the ocean, and the following night get a good rest and anchorage. So once we leave Avila Beach, our next stop would be in Half Moon Bay, right by San Francisco. Again, it's overnight passage. You leave in the morning, you get there before evening of the following day. Now it's a good anchorage again, and then you have to follow the weather. Now once you leave Half Moon Bay, you will be rounding Cape Mendocino, which is quite a rough point. One day we were in Eureka Bay anchoring. A big tugboat brought in a 80-foot powerboat with a Coast Guard on the side of it.
It was a beautiful yacht.
And we went and look at her when they put her next to a dock. All front windows was knocked down, and believe it or not, the big wave hit the yacht on the front and knocked all the windows out and took all interior furniture, console, everything, and went out the back door. Luckily the boat didn't went down, but anyway, that's what happened to them. So it can be very, very treacherous cape to round it. Now you also have a very bad currents out there, because a canyon in front of Mendocino, it's quite steep, so there is a very bad currents, and when you're rounding it, you should stay at least 5 miles offshore, because the rocks sticking out about 3-4 miles outside from the coast. So you have to make sure you're around the cape westward side of the buoy, which marks the hazards to navigation. Now, if the weather should start deteriorate, because to leave Half Moon Bay towards Cape Mendocino, you make an overnight passage, and actually you're not going to get there till evening of the following day. So if you should be tired or the weather start deteriorate,
depending on the speed of your boat,
yeah,
of course.
You can anchor in a place called Shelter Cove. Shelter Cove is only a few miles south of Cape Mendocino. Has a nice place, protected. You still in open ocean, but it's protected from the northwest winds, so it's a good place to hide. And then when the weather permits, you continue rounding the Mendocino. Once you round the Mendocino, you come by Eureka. Now Eureka Harbor is well protected, but it's not very good place.
It's a long way into the harbor.
And it's really just kind of long channels, and also a lot of debris floats through it from Arcata, from the big bay. So you have a lot of times trees and
bark,
a bunch of debris floating down there. So anchoring is not very good. You can always pick up a marina if you wanted, but if you, when you decided to leave Eureka Harbor, you got to be very careful because Eureka is notorious for a bad bar when entering into the harbor. And if the seas are running too close together, it's very dangerous, because just in case if your engine should die, you will be in a very bad trouble, because there will be no place to run except straight on the rocks. So if you can avoid Eureka, that probably would be the best, because another about 70 miles you have another good harbor we call a Crescent City. And a Crescent City harbor, it's a point southward, so you don't have no bar or any kind of difficulties to enter the harbor or leaving the harbor. So it's a nice place to stop. You can fill up the diesel, you can fill up the propane if you need it. There is grocery store in a walking distance. So it's a nice place to visit.
Laundry.
Yeah. Once you leave Crescent City, the next point you have to be very careful is Cape Blanco. Now, what we have to say about Cape Blanco is this here. Then Cape Blanco, you cannot depend on the weather forecast, because we went around the Cape Blanco several times where the forecast was for light winds. And the truth was that at 20 miles before and 20 miles after Cape Blanco, winds were light. But right in front of Cape Blanco, we had a 35 knots of winds, which was a full-blown gale with a good-sized seas and also partially foggy. So you got to be very careful when you needing Cape Blanco. If you should see the wind strengthening, you can hide behind a Cape Blanco place called Port Orford.
Good anchorage,
And, it's a very good anchorage, very good protected. And then when you have a good weather report, remember, don't trust it. Don't trust it, because we did, and we were very surprised what we found outside on the ocean. But anyway, once you leave the Port Orford, as soon as you start clearing the point, if you see any kind of white caps on the water, or any kind of swell building up, turn around and go back, because you will find something much, much worse out in the ocean. And plus, you will be in a danger point of a rogue river, which a reef extending out into the seaward. Once you clear the Cape Blanco, the next good place to stop if you feel like take a rest or the weather should start deteriorating, it's a Newport, Oregon. We went inside. Again, there is it's very foggy on the coast, as all Oregon coast is very, very foggy. But once you get in, you can take a marina, rent a space in the marina, which is right by the entry into the harbor. But we prefer to anchor, and we found out in about 3 miles up the river, which is called Yakina River. We found a nice anchorage on the side of a river, right by the power lines.
Beautiful spot, really nice.
So it's very interesting. Then maybe I say half a mile from entry into the Newport, it's very, very foggy. As soon as you go about a mile or so inland, weather totally clear up, and you can take a dinghy, go into the town, which is very interesting.
Good town. We liked it very much.
Yeah, several nice places to eat, a nice place to visit.
Yeah.
Now, once you have a clear forecast to continue north, you leave Newport, and now you're going to have 2 nights passage.
There are a lot of little places you can stop along the way, but almost every single harbor has a bar, and if you're not interested in going across the bar and all that, then you can we just continued up to Grays Harbor.
When you have a nice weather, you should just continue, because you can't be stopping every 30-40 miles. It would take you a year to get up there. So once you leave Newport, you cross the entry to Columbia River, and that's another place you can stop if you want to, but we prefer, if the weather holds, to keep on going. And only about 40 miles or 50 miles from entry into Columbia River, you find a harbor which is called a Grays Harbor. Now, Grays Harbor has got a reasonable easy entry into a harbor, although it's exposed to the west, but it's about almost 2 miles wide. Now, once you get inside, you have a marina where you can rent a space, or you can anchor like we did, which is not recommended. I repeat, it is not recommended. Because
it's like the worst anchorage ever.
There is not a bay. All the chart shows a really big bay, but the truth is there is just
mud flats,
mud
flats
flats with the channels in between. And the only place you was able to find an anchor is on the side of a channel with 2 anchors holding us from the running on the mud, and 1 anchor hold us from going back into the channel. But as we always prefer anchor to tying in a marina, because over 30 years cruising, we never once went to the marina.
I don't want to break our record or anything.
We didn't want to be just stubborn.
But there's a public marina there, and it looks like it's pretty good, so not too expensive or anything either.
Yeah. And anyway, we stayed out there for 2 nights, and we took a dinghy to marina where we went out to shore. It was not really much to look at it, but anyway, it was a nice place to kick back and relax. And then from there, you wait for a weather forecast. Now, you only have about 80 miles to Cape Flattery till you rounded a point into Straits of Fuga. Now, at that point, you have to be very careful because, number one, when it gets very foggy off Tatoosh Island, you have some hazard to navigation. And number 2, you have a very heavy traffic.
Lots of shipping.
Because all the shipping is going to Vancouver Harbor and to Seattle. They're just very heavy.
And the weather can be really dicey. You want to make sure that you go there when the weather's going to be good.
And even if the
currents are good going into the Straits.
Even if the weather is good, if the gale blew 2-3 days earlier, you might run big swells running into the Straits. And then if a current running out, you have an opposite current creates a big steep swell. So
you got to time your entry to make sure you're going in the time that the current's going in with you, so you're not having opposing current.
And then right when you get into the Straits, about only 5 miles in, you have a nice anchorage called a Nia Bay. It's a very nice place to stop, a good anchorage. And
on the U.S. side.
Yeah, it's you can reprovision, not big of a store, but your basic things you can get there. And from there it's just 1 day of sailing, motor sailing up the Straits into Port Angeles, where you can find everything you needed. In Nia Bay you find fuel, and you also find propane and a small grocery store, so you pretty much can resupply if you need to. Now, remember, when you're going northward, as I described, it's not much different going down south. Just important part is to keep on watch the weather forecast. And what we found on several occasions was this: that when they forecast light winds, usually light winds mean variables, or 5 to 10 knots. And if they're forecasting stronger winds, it's best to hang in anchorage and wait till the right time comes, because you will accomplish nothing. Try to power into the heads, especially when
if you're going north, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going south and you have a good 15 to 20 knots, just take advantage of it and just keep going.
Yeah. But also true is, if you get out to 200 miles or so offshore, you can expect much larger seas, much stronger winds, but most of all, there is no place to hide. So.
But then you avoid all the currents along the coast,
So there is no really one way or another way. But when you're close to shore, your voyage is going to be smoother, and you have a place to hide. And if you're in a hurry, you can pretty much avoid all the problems with the weather.
And like Jules said, if you have a crew, more than 2 people, and you don't mind, just keep going. Especially if you're heading north, you just keep going. If the weather's good, don't stop.
So I hope that video will be helpful to some of you who decide to make the passage. Like I say, the weather is never the same, so you cannot say because that's how we had it that you're going to have it. But one thing is almost for sure. Of Point Conception, we had an everyday report of gales, but what we found out in the closer examination is that 5 to 10 miles, the winds was only about 10-15 knots with no more than 5 foot waves, while offshore, say 60 miles, you had a full-blown gale with a good-sized seas. Yeah. So if you're waiting for a report of the clear weather, you might be waiting there for a long time, because we waited for a week, and the gale was continued day after day after day, and we decided to go, and that's exactly what we encountered. Not once, but several times. So weather on the Point Conception close to shore is much calmer than offshore, and the Cape Mendocino, you have to remember most of it of the strength of the currents. It's really, really treacherous when you get currents opposing the winds. And then Cape Blanco. Cannot depend on the weather forecast, because although weather forecast it's for a larger area, right over Point Blanco, we had some strong gale blowing, but it was supposed to be calm. But we also went once when it was a calm, so it's not it's always the same. And Tatoosh Island entry to the Straits of Fuga. Remember, steep seas in the case of a gale in the last 2-3 days.
Time your entry so you're going in with a current instead of having the current coming out against you.
Watch for the shipping, and about 5 miles from the shore, again you have some rocks, so you make sure you can clear them very well. And then once you get into the Straits, very soon you come into Nia Bay. And even if you have a decent sized swells running in the Straits, once you get closer to shore towards Nia Bay, the seas come down, and actually entering into Nia Bay it's quite easy, even if the Straits are quite rough.
And I can't emphasize enough, we've known enough people that have run into trouble off of the Washington and Oregon coast. Be prepared. Act like you're going on. If you're just going coastal, make it like you're going on a long offshore passage. Be prepared for the worst weather, because you may encounter it and you want to be safe. Okay, so I guess that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumb up and a comment. And thanks again to all of you who support us through Patreon and PayPal. We really appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
See you guys next time. Bye.
Sailing for the South Seas and the full sails are flying. 100 miles through the line.